Have you ever found yourself kind of stuck in this battle with certain foods? You know that feeling where you really genuinely try to cut back, make promises, but then it's like almost against your will, you just can't seem to stop. It's super frustrating, right?
Hmm.
And, well, a lot of people blame themselves, thinking it's about willpower. But what if it's not about willpower at all? Today, we're doing a deep dive into something pretty eye-opening. The actual science behind why certain foods, especially those ultra-processed ones, can literally rewire our brains. This isn't about judgment, okay? It's about understanding a biological thing, a real problem.
Absolutely. And our mission for you today, well, it's pretty clear. We want to explore how these ultra-processed foods, UPFs as they're called, affect your neurochemistry. It's actually quite similar to substances like nicotine or alcohol. But more than that, we want to give you the knowledge, the tools, things rooted in neuroscience and, actual clinical experience. So you can start making really informed choices. Feel like you can regain control.
Yeah, and we're drawing a lot from Dr. Claire Wilcox's fantastic book, Rewire Your Food-Addicted Brain. It pulls together so much research, plus insights from experts on the Food Junkies podcast. So let's dive in. Okay, first things first. When we use that word addiction, especially with food, it sounds, well, intense. What does addiction actually mean from a science perspective, and how does food fit in?
Right. So from a neuroscience standpoint, the absolute core of addiction is loss of control. It's not just wanting something badly. It's about real changes happening in the brain because you've repeatedly consumed a substance. Your brain kind of unconsciously learns to push you towards getting more of whatever made you feel good initially. It starts overriding your conscious plans.
Oh, yeah, I think we all know someone, maybe it's even us, who's rationalized that extra cookie, saying, oh, just tonight, and
Yeah.
then boom, you're doing it again the next day. For people really grappling with food addiction, that loss of control can feel just as powerful, just as overwhelming as it does with drugs or alcohol. We've heard stories where just a tiny taste of a trigger food can set off, well, what some people call a rampage of feasting.
And this isn't exactly a new problem, but the scale has exploded. I mean, the World Health Organization called obesity a global epidemic way back in 1997. And by 2018, here in the U.S., over 40% of adults were considered obese. You connect that to the bigger picture. Some studies suggest over a fifth of U.S. deaths might be linked to obesity. That's, similar to or maybe even more than smoking.
Wow. Okay, that's staggering. So with that context, the big question is, why? Why are these high-sugar, ultra-processed foods so good at creating this addictive loop?
Well, honestly, comes down to design. They're basically engineered in labs to hook you. We're talking foods loaded with artificial flavors, additives, emulsifiers,
Yeah.
mass-produced. They're incredibly high in energy density, sodium, sugar, fat, refined carbs. The works. A quick rule of thumb. If sugar, or one of its like 262 different names, is in the top 4 ingredients, that's high sugar. Our brains, you see, evolved when calories were scarce. So these super available, hyper-rewarding foods, they just light up our reward pathways like like a pinball machine going nuts.
And the evidence backs this up, right? There was that study. Participants eating lots of ultra-processed food ended up eating 500 calories more a day, just over 2 weeks, compared to people eating less processed stuff. That's huge.
Yes.
And unconscious.
Exactly, unconscious. And Ashley Gearhart, a leading researcher, she did something fascinating. She took the criteria the Surgeon General used to say nicotine was addictive and applied them to ultra-processed foods. And guess what? They met the criteria, plus craving. So the argument is pretty strong. If nicotine is addictive, then these UPFs likely are too. Which brings up that really important question. Is food addiction actually a substance addiction?
That feels like a big claim, like calling food a substance, but scientifically the answer seems to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. Primarily, it is a substance addiction. It's the specific chemical properties and the physical nature of these UPFs, the way they're processed, the concentrations. It's not just the general behavior of eating. That's what drives the reinforcement and the brain changes. Sure, there's overlap with behavioral addiction, but the core issue, according to the research, is the substance.
Right, the substance itself.
Okay, I can imagine some listeners thinking, hang on a minute. So let's tackle some common doubts. First one, we have to eat to live, so it's just crazy to call food addictive.
Yeah, that's a totally logical thought, but let's reframe it slightly. We don't have to eat ultra-processed food to live, do we? So calling those specific foods addictive, given how they're made and what they do to our brains, actually, that's not crazy at all.
Okay, good point. What about this one? People with food addiction don't get withdrawal like smokers or alcoholics. This might actually surprise you, but many do experience withdrawal. Experts talk about symptoms like nausea, headaches, feeling really sleepy, even vomiting sometimes. Irritability is a big one. And these often clear up in about 4 or 5 days. Plus, lag studies show sugar withdrawal in animals looks remarkably like opioid withdrawal. There's even a validated scale now to measure food withdrawal.
And George Koob, he's the director at NIAA, the Alcohol Institute, he points out that withdrawal can absolutely be defined by subjective symptoms. Think about nicotine use disorder. A lot of that is subjective feeling, right? Doesn't have to be shakes and seizures.
Right. Okay, final skepticism point. How can food be addictive if we haven't found the one single molecule responsible?
Chris Van Tolken makes a really strong case against this. He argues, basically, why should that matter? We get addicted to things that powerfully activate our reward network, period, whether it's one molecule or a complex combination. The scientific consensus is building. Some food is addictive.
Okay. So wrapping this part up, what's the big takeaway for you listening? It's about acknowledging this truth. These high-sugar, ultra-processed foods can genuinely alter brain chemistry. They fuel their own overconsumption. And here's a really core insight, maybe even a relief. Often the most effective path to long-term recovery is actually abstinence from those specific problem foods. It's not about all food, just the ones acting like a drug in your system.
And figuring out which foods are problematic for you, well, that involves a few things. We look at how processed it is. The Novier scale helps with that. We look at the macronutrients, the salt, is it hyperpalatable, and how quickly does it hit your reward system. Faster-acting, low-fiber stuff tends to be more addictive. If you look at Table 1 in Dr. Wilcox's book, it ranks foods like pizza, chocolate, chips way up high, compared to things like eggs or cucumbers way down low. It's pretty stark.
And this can get personal, right? Even in your own kitchen. One of us realized they were accidentally making these hyper-palatable combinations at home, using healthy things like whole wheat flour, fruit, butter, salt. But the ratios created that same addictive quality found in factory foods. It wasn't the ingredients alone, it was the combination.
Exactly. And here's a mind-blower from Michael Moss. Sugar hits the brain's reward centers even faster than many known addictive drugs. We're talking maybe 1 second for sugar versus about 10 seconds for nicotine from a cigarette.
1 second. Think about how fast that conditions you. Wow. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've all heard the standard weight loss advice, right? Just eat less, move more. But why does that simple formula fail so many people, especially when dealing with these kinds of foods? Let's get into the neurobiology.
Well, because so much of our motivation, our decision-making, our actual behavior around food is often unconscious. It's deeply hardwired. Our brain biology, frankly, resists change, especially when these foods are literally designed to hijack our natural systems. It's not simple. It's this incredibly complex dance between the brain, the gut, the pancreas, even our fat tissue, all regulated by hormones and neurotransmitters, especially dopamine.
Right. And you mentioned our food intake is mainly governed by 3 big brain systems: homeostatic, hedonic, and the stress response system. How do these normally helpful systems get thrown off balance by processed foods?
Okay, let's start with a homeostatic system. Think of it as your body's energy accountant. It's trying to keep things balanced, maintain a certain body weight range. It uses hunger and fullness signals to make sure you get the nutrition you need. But here's the kicker. These highly rewarding foods are so incredibly dense in calories, but not necessarily in volume. So your stomach doesn't stretch as much for the same calorie load. The nerves don't send strong "I'm full" signals. You end up feeling still hungry, or at least not satisfied, even though you've taken in plenty, maybe even too many calories.
So if your body isn't telling you you're full, how are you supposed to stop?
Exactly, and that's where the hedonic system jumps in. This system is all about eating for pleasure, pure pleasure. It operates regardless of whether you're actually physically hungry, and it's driven powerfully by neurotransmitters like dopamine that feel good, chemical that reinforces behaviors.
Okay, so you've got one system not registering fullness properly and another system screaming, "This feels amazing, do it again."
Precisely. And highly rewarding foods push both systems way out of whack. They cause these really intense dopamine surges, much like nicotine or alcohol do. And that massive surge leads to incredibly powerful conditioned learning. You get stamped into your brain. The bigger and faster the dopamine hit, the stronger the conditioning. That's why, as we said, even just a little taste can act like a drug priming effect, kicking off a whole binge.
So what that means for you, listening, is your brain becomes hypersensitive to cues related to those foods, the sights, the smells, the sounds, the places. Think about driving past your favorite fast food joint and suddenly getting this intense urge, or just walking down the grocery aisle where they keep the cookie dough and starting to salivate. Your brain is already firing, anticipating that reward.
Already anticipating, yeah.
Now let's bring in the third player, The stress response system. This is huge, isn't it? The whole comfort eating thing.
Oh, absolutely critical, because these highly rewarding foods, they offer very real, albeit very short-term, emotional relief.
Yeah.
They can temporarily dial down stress, numb negative feelings, but in the long run, they actually wreak havoc on your stress system and your overall emotional stability.
Hmm.
Overuse leads to your dopamine receptors becoming less sensitive, so you need more to get the same effect, and you feel kind of flat baseline. And then you get biological withdrawal responses, anxiety, irritability, low mood, very similar to withdrawal from other addictive drugs.
Which, of course, makes the urge to go back to the food even stronger. Especially early on when you're trying to stop. You just want to make those bad feelings go away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that fuels what we call negative reinforcement learning. Your brain learns, feeling bad, eat this, feel better temporarily. It becomes a default coping mechanism.
And it's so common to see food addiction alongside things like depression, anxiety, chronic stress.
Very common. There's a lot of shared brain circuitry involved. We often see reduced connectivity between the amygdala, the emotion center, and the prefrontal cortex, which is supposed to regulate those emotions and impulses. It makes it harder to manage feelings and harder to resist the urge to self-medicate with food.
Digging even deeper, you mentioned trauma earlier, PTSD specifically. How does that connect?
There's a really strong link. Trauma, particularly early life trauma or chronic stress, significantly bumps up the risk for binge eating and food addiction. It kind of creates this perfect storm. It primes the brain for negative reinforcement. I need relief. It can impair impulse control by affecting the prefrontal cortex. It might increase sensitivity to rewards. I need that hit even more. And it often disrupts sleep, which, as we know, messes with hunger hormones and cravings, all fuel for the fire.
Wow. Okay, and thinking about this broader context, let's talk about weight stigma for a second. That constant societal pressure to be thin, it can get internalized, right? Shame, low self-worth.
Absolutely. And that internalized shame increases dysphoria, that general feeling of unease or dissatisfaction, which ironically creates a perfect setup for turning back to those comforting, highly rewarding foods. It becomes a vicious cycle.
So often it's the culture, the stigma, not the person's body size itself that's driving a lot of the mental health struggles.
That's a really important distinction.
Okay, let's tie this back to decision-making. You've made the plan, you're committed, and then poof, your resolve vanishes. Why?
We often talk about the inner rebel or the addicted brain taking over. Remember how overuse of these foods can impact the prefrontal cortex, your executive control center. When that's impaired, your more primitive, automatic, habit-driven brain takes the wheel. Behaviors become unconscious. Or your conscious brain starts generating these incredibly convincing rationalizations, telling yourself, oh, I deserve this, or just one bite won't hurt, or I'll start again tomorrow. Sound familiar?
Painfully familiar. That example you shared from the book about the person dropping a glass jelly jar into cookie dough and still eating it, still baking it, convincing themselves it was fine because the craving was that strong, that just shows the sheer power of that inner rebel voice.
It really does. And brain imaging studies confirm this. People with food addiction often show similar patterns of brain wiring and cognitive deficits as people with diagnosed substance use disorders. Things like reduced gray matter in key areas, impaired cognitive control. These changes can literally make it harder to remember why you wanted to quit in the heat of a craving moment.
So it's this two-way street, isn't it? Pre-existing vulnerabilities can make you more susceptible, and then the foods themselves actually cause further brain changes and damage.
Exactly. Amy Reichelt's research showed rats fed diets of pie, cookies, cake.
Oh.
They developed memory and impulse control problems in just 4 or 5 days.
4 or 5 days.
Yeah. Your brain is literally fighting against itself in this situation.
This all leads to a really crucial question. How do you actually know if this is you? If you might have food addiction? As you said, it's not an official diagnosis in the big manuals like the DSM yet, but it definitely exists. The science and clinical experience are clear.
Right. The most widely used tool we have right now is the Yale Food Addiction Scale, the YFAS. It's built directly from the criteria used for substance use disorders in the DSM. It looks for symptoms like intense craving, losing control over how much you eat, spending a lot of time thinking about or getting food, using food in risky ways even when you know it's causing problems, and those physiological signs like tolerance, needing more for the same effect, and withdrawal.
We hear stories that really echo these criteria, like Eileen, who just couldn't stick to any plan, always ended up obsessing over cookies alone at night. Or Lucy skipping important life events because of shame about her body, calling in sick from food hangovers. Does any of that sound familiar to you listening?
It's also really important to mention potential false positives here. Sometimes the symptoms measured by the YFAS can overlap with eating disorders like bulimia or binge eating disorder. So it's crucial to figure out, is the primary issue food addiction? Is it an eating disorder? Or is it both happening together? Because the treatment approach can be quite different. Food addiction often points towards abstinence or significant reduction of trigger foods, whereas many eating disorder treatments focus more on moderation and normalizing eating patterns. It's a critical distinction.
Good point. And often other things are going on too, right? Like depression, anxiety, ADHD, trauma.
Absolutely. Those often co-occur and need to be addressed as part of the whole picture for recovery to be successful.
So, okay, let's bring this together. The really good news in all this, because we now understand this is largely a biological problem, rooted in your brain, triggered by substances outside yourself. It means there's a workable solution based on neuroscience. It means you can finally let go of that crushing self-blame. It is truly not your fault.
That's such a crucial message. And the foundation of recovery really starts with one core principle. Stop, or at the very least significantly reduce, eating those specific, highly rewarding, problematic foods. And this isn't about punishment or deprivation for its own sake. It's about giving your brain the chance to rebalance its chemistry, to heal.
Right. And the amazing thing is your brain wants to heal. It has incredible plasticity. By consistently cutting down exposure to these sort of toxic substances, your brain will start to rewire itself back towards health. There's a process called extinction, basically. The power of those cues, those triggers, gradually fades over time. Think about an ex-smoker who eventually finds the smell of smoke repulsive. That can happen with trigger foods, too.
Exactly. And all those issues we talked about, the cue sensitivity, the poor impulse control, the mood swings, they start to improve, they start to go away with time and consistency.
Okay, here's something that might sound counterintuitive, but it's really important. Why is weight loss not the main goal when you're recovering from food addiction?
Yeah, it's a paradox, isn't it? But prioritizing weight loss, especially through typical dieting and calorie restriction, it often backfires. It hinders recovery. Why? Because dieting usually leads to undereating, being hungry. And hunger is a massive trigger for binging, for craving those hyper-rewarding foods. What your brain actually needs, particularly in those first 6 to 12 months, is consistent nurturing. Enough nutritious food. That nourishment is critical for stabilizing your reward system, boosting your mood, improving emotional stability, and strengthening that all-important impulse control.
But people might be thinking, but I do want to lose weight.
And that's completely understandable. The good news is, if you are carrying excess weight, healthy weight release often happens naturally as a side effect of recovery. As your brain chemistry balances and your body finds its natural set point, weight often comes off.
Well, patience is key.
Patience is absolutely key. It might not happen immediately, and that's perfectly okay. The focus needs to be on healing the brain first.
So for you listening, let's shift the focus. Instead of the scale, what are your real recovery goals? Maybe it's freedom from constant food obsession, more energy, a stable mood, feeling neutral around food, better concentration, genuine self-esteem, living life more fully. Those are powerful goals.
And achieving those goals is so much easier with support. Community is vital. Joining a recovery group like OA, other 12-step programs, or even online communities. Listening to podcasts like Food Junkies. It gives you hope. It reduces that awful shame. It boosts your mood and motivation. And the neuroscience confirms it. Social connection actually lights up your brain's reward system in a healthy way, releasing feel-good chemicals, building empathy. It's protective.
Okay, let's get practical. Let's talk about the what and how of eating in recovery. We'll lay out 3 core principles and then discuss that big question: abstinence or harm reduction for you.
Okay, principle 1. Eat plenty of high-quality, nourishing food. Think frequent, minimally processed meals. Lots of vegetables, fruits, lean protein, good fiber, healthy fats. This directly helps stabilize your mood and impulse control. Protein, for example, is really satiating and helps balance hormones involved in hunger and reward.
And variety. You mentioned variety earlier. Why is that so important?
It serves a couple of purposes. It prevents you from over-relying on just a few foods, which could potentially become new problems. And it helps prevent your taste buds from getting desensitized or bored. It's amazing. Dr. Wilcox notes that after just about 14 days off added sugar, your taste buds can reset. Fresh fruit starts tasting incredibly sweet.
Wow. Okay, principle 2.
Minimize, or ideally, stop eating your specific highly rewarding trigger foods. This might mean setting a clear rule, like avoiding foods with sugar in the top 4 ingredients. Or it might mean developing your own personal red light list based on your experience. Common culprits are things like pizza, chocolate, chips, cookies, often things high in both fat and simple sugars, refined carbs. But again, it's personal.
Totally personal. Like we said, for one person, chips might be fine in moderation, but cookies are a total no-go. For someone else, it could be bread or potatoes or even bananas. You have to figure out your triggers.
Exactly. And principle 3, portion appropriately. This is really important, especially early on, to help retrain your brain's expectations and prevent carb creep.
Carb creep.
Yeah, where you might start slowly increasing portion sizes of even allowed foods, like maybe grains or fruits, or you might accidentally create new hyper-palatable combinations at home. Even with healthy ingredients, using appropriate portions helps keep things in balance. Some people even find a small, planned bedtime snack a constitutional helpful.
To prevent getting overly hungry before bed.
Right, which can trigger insomnia or late-night cravings.
What about intermittent fasting? Is that helpful here?
Generally, no. For food addiction, prolonged fasting and intense hunger can easily reactivate those addictive pathways. Consistent, moderate nourishment is usually better.
Okay, this brings us to that really important decision point. How do you approach your plan? Strict abstinence versus harm reduction.
Let's look at the pros and cons. Abstinence, totally stopping specific trigger foods, has real benefits. It tends to restore brain function faster. Those cues lose their power more quickly. Impulse control improves as the prefrontal cortex heals. Emotional health often stabilizes faster. Plus, clear rules can reduce decision fatigue. I just don't eat X. Simple.
But it's not always easy, is it? What are the downsides?
Well, humans sometimes rebel against strict rules, right? Especially if there's any history of eating disorder tendencies where restriction itself is a trigger. And it's just harder with food than, say, alcohol because you have to navigate food choices constantly. For some, it can feel shaming or overly rigid. And as we keep saying, trigger foods vary so much from person to person.
Okay, so what about harm reduction?
Harm reduction focuses on minimizing the negative consequences without necessarily demanding complete cessation of all potentially problematic foods. It respects your autonomy, allows for flexibility. It's about making informed choices to reduce harm. For instance, maybe you decide you won't keep ice cream in the house because that's where you lose control, but you might allow yourself to have a scoop occasionally when out with friends if that feels manageable.
Like John, the listener example with diabetes and gluten intolerance. He used harm reduction by finding alternatives, protein bars with specific sweeteners, special breads, cauliflower pizza crusts. He found a way to manage his health sustainably without feeling totally deprived of certain eating experiences. That worked for him.
Exactly. But harm reduction has potential downsides too. Some worry it might mean people don't achieve the full brain healing that abstinence can offer, or that it's a slippery slope back to problematic use for some individuals. For people who thrive on clarity, the clear boxes of abstinence might just feel simpler and safer.
So for you listening, the takeaway is, there's no single right answer fits all. If you know you push back hard against rules, or if you have an eating disorder history, maybe harm reduction is a gentler, more sustainable start. But if you know that for you, one bite of that specific cookie always leads down a rabbit hole, then abstinence from that particular item is probably essential.
It's really a continuum. And many people actually use a hybrid approach.
Yeah.
Abstinence from their absolute worst triggers, harm reduction strategies for others. It's about finding what works for your brain and your life.
Okay, beyond the food plan itself, let's talk skills. Because good intentions often aren't enough when that addiction wiring kicks in, right? It can feel like it just steals your free will.
Yeah, absolutely. Skills are crucial. First, skills to reduce sensitivity to those food cues. Honestly, the best way is often just avoid the trigger. Proactive avoidance. So first step, identify your personal triggers. Is it specific foods? Places like the work break room or certain grocery aisles? Times of day? Emotional states like being tired or lonely? Then take action. Get probably foods out of the house. Change your driving route. Have an escape plan ready for social events where trigger foods will be present.
That's smart. And sometimes triggers are hidden, right? Like if you always crave something sweet after dinner, maybe check your salsa brand for hidden sugar. Or was there a flour tortilla in that meal that spiked your blood sugar? Little things can matter.
They really can. Another powerful skill. Physical activity, exercise, walking, yoga, anything you enjoy has been shown to reduce the brain's reactivity to food cues.
Right.
It helps kind of crowd out the addiction pathways. But again, key point, don't frame it as just burning calories. Focus on feeling good, stress relief, and adjust your food intake appropriately.
And sleep. We keep coming back to sleep.
Because it's foundational. Sleep deprivation messes with your hunger hormones, ghrelin up, leptin down, and makes your brain more sensitive to food cues. A terrible combination. Aim for 7+ hours consistently.
Protect your sleep like it's gold.
Yes. And related to that is honoring your biorhythms. Really listening to your body's signals for hunger, thirst, rest. Even if it means going against social norms sometimes. That HALT TSS acronym is great here. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, thirsty, sick, stressed. Check in with yourself. Are any of those making you vulnerable?
That takes practice, doesn't it? Ignoring the clock or what everyone else is doing. Like the example of realizing you do best with a big breakfast and an early dinner, even if it's not the family norm. Or taking a nap midday if you need it. That's real self-care, not being selfish.
Exactly. And mindfulness fits right in here too. Just being present, aware. A regular meditation practice, even brief, strengthens your ability to notice triggers, notice urges, notice your internal state without immediately reacting. It creates space.
Okay, so you're doing all this preventative stuff, but a craving still hits. Intense. What do you do in that moment? First rule.
First rule, don't feed it. Don't act on the urge immediately. Then employ strategies. Get busy. Action is key. Go for a walk, call a supportive friend, dive into a hobby. Sitting and stewing often makes it worse. Or play it forward. Really visualize. What happens in 3 hours if I eat this? Tomorrow? Next week? How will I feel? Then visualize not eating it. How will that feel? An advanced skill is urge surfing, mindfully observing the craving like a wave, noticing its sensations, how it builds, peaks, and eventually fades without getting swept away, knowing it'll pass.
Those are great practical tools. Now, let's zoom in on skills for emotional resilience, because so much of this is tied to managing feelings, right?
Absolutely. Step 1 is recognizing which emotions usually trigger your urge to eat for comfort. Is it sadness, anger, that edgy irritability, boredom, shame? Even positive feelings like excitement can be triggers for some. Know your patterns.
And community comes back in here too, doesn't it? Not just for accountability, but for emotional support.
Critically important. Isolation breeds addiction. Connection heals. Sharing experiences, feeling understood, getting encouragement. It activates positive brain chemistry, reduces shame, builds resilience.
You mentioned emotional granularity, being able to name feelings more specifically. How does that help?
When you can identify precisely what you're feeling, okay, this isn't just bad, this is disappointment mixed with frustration. It gives you more information and more control. It builds your capacity to actually feel the feeling and let it be, rather than immediately reaching for food to numb it out. The RAIN exercise is great for this. Recognize the feeling. Allow it. Investigate it with kindness. Nurture yourself.
And finding joy elsewhere. It sounds simple, but actively cultivating joy from other parts of life is huge.
Yes, rediscover things you love. Friendships, nature, hobbies, creative outlets, even the pleasure of simple, nourishing food. Make a list. Schedule joy in.
And crucially, letting go of the shame.
Oh, fundamentally. Understand, this is not a personal failing. It's often a response to an environment saturated with addictive substances. Shift the focus from blaming yourself to understanding the context, including the role of the food industry. That's incredibly freeing.
And what about slips? They happen. How should people view them?
Not as failures. Don't label yourself a chronic relapser. Reframe it. You're a chronic never-giver-upper. Slips are data. They're opportunities to learn. What happened? What were the triggers? What support did I need? What can I do differently next time? The most important thing is to get right back on track at the very next meal. No shame, just learning and moving forward.
Okay, finally, let's talk about improving that core decision-making ability, strengthening that prefrontal cortex.
A lot of it comes back to reinforcing those key habits we discussed. Good sleep, regular movement, strong community support. They all directly nourish brain health and boost executive function. Community is especially powerful here because it constantly reinforces the reality, yes, this food is addictive, countering all the societal messages telling you otherwise.
And that mental skill, cognitive reframing, challenging those tricky thoughts.
Super important. You have to catch those inner rebel rationalizations in the act. Identify the false beliefs. Life will be boring without sugar. I can handle just one. This isn't addiction, I'm just weak. Then actively find the evidence against them. Reframe them into more balanced, realistic thoughts based on your actual experience and knowledge. This literally engages and strengthens your prefrontal cortex, your rational brain.
One last piece of advice here.
Be really mindful of addiction transfer. Sometimes when people give up trigger foods, they lean more heavily on other things like alcohol, maybe nicotine, excessive shopping, etc. These things also impact brain wiring, compromise impulse control, and can lead to cross-addiction. Be aware of those potential swaps.
So the big message here for you listening, you really do have incredible power to change your brain, to rewire it, to reclaim control. Don't feel like you have to do everything at once. Just pick one or two tools, one or two insights that resonated today. Start there. Experiment. Find what works for you. We have covered so much ground today, really showing how food addiction isn't some kind of moral failing. It's a genuine neurobiological condition. And the really, really good news is that with this knowledge, with these practical, science-backed tools, you can actively rewire your brain. You can reclaim your life.
Absolutely. And remember, recovery isn't usually a straight line. It's a journey, a continuum. It takes time. It takes practice. Be patient with yourself. But also know that this field is moving fast. There are real efforts happening now to get ultra-processed food use disorder officially recognized. And that recognition will open doors for much more research, better support, more effective public health strategies. Change is coming.
So for you listening right now, just imagine a future where you're not locked in that constant battle with cravings, where food holds a kind of comfortable neutrality for you, where you feel sustained peace, have energy, feel joy, regardless of the number on the scale. What if understanding how your own brain works is the key? The ultimate act of liberation, allowing you to finally trust your body's real signals again and live that full, abundant life you truly deserve.
Keep coming back to these ideas. Keep practicing the skills. And please remember, there are so many resources out there, books, podcasts, communities ready to support you on this path. You don't have to do it alone.